So joining me now, it is my pleasure to introduce this great man. Joining me all the way from his home in LA, California. He is a 10-year NFL vet, a 3-time Pro Bowler, as well as a Super Bowl champ with the Baltimore Ravens. And let's not forget, probably the smartest man I've ever met too, Brendon Ayanbadejo.
What's up, Patty? I'm excited to be on the show and see what you got cooked up today.
Well, mate, you know what? Let's just go straight into it, B. You've got a really great history within the NFL, obviously spanning over a decade. But what I'm really interested in getting off the bat is your story and how that path ended up. Because, I mean, obviously you're all Pac-10 at UCLA, dominating down there. But then what happened from there? Can you share that story with us?
Yeah, I think, for me, I've always been an underdog. So just to get to UCLA, I had to go to junior college and
Right.
I had to, fight my way to get into UCLA. And eventually I cracked the starting lineup. And then my senior year, I was all Pac-10. I wasn't even drafted into the NFL. So I signed a free agent deal with the Atlanta Falcons. They had just come off of a Super Bowl loss to the Broncos. And so I didn't make that team. I went home, just pretty much trained and watched football for a year. Then I signed with the Bears, didn't make that team. Then I went to Canada, played in Canada, came back home. Then I signed with the Ravens. The Ravens sent me to NFL Europe, where I played for the Amsterdam Admirals. I got home, was preparing for the season to start before training camp or before anything had ever even happened, got cut by the Ravens. So now we're talking, I came out in 1999 and now we're fast forwarding to 2002. And I'm like, man, what am I going to do? So I went back up to Canada, had another spectacular season up in Canada, and then I signed with the Miami Dolphins. And then I made it finally after being cut 3 times and playing in 3 different continents, playing American football. And I finally made that team. And I never looked back from there. But I've always been an underdog, so I've always had to fight for every little scrap that I've ever gotten or received. I've always had to earn it. And so making it into the NFL was no different.
But that shaped you completely, hasn't it, into all the success that you went on to have both professionally, but personally, and now also in business?
Yeah, I mean, it really cemented the fact for me that hard work will eventually pay off, even though, people they think that they're kind of stuck. But, as long as you're working towards a goal or working towards something, you definitely are going to get delayed gratification. Nothing's going to happen right here and right now in the moment. So, dating back to my senior year at high school and then going to junior college, then going to UCLA and having to put in work in other leagues, and then finally making the league. And then it's the same thing I do with business, just knowing that the work that I do now is going to pay off eventually at some point. So yeah, I've always had to work for it, and hard work is kind of just what I'm built and what I'm made out of.
And I really appreciate that. And I think I appreciate your journey a little more, Brendon, this year, given everything that's going on. I think when you look at what you ultimately wanted to achieve in that 4 or 5 year span, it was to play in the NFL, right? But So what then has happened, I suppose, is you're on this journey for so many years of trying to achieve this goal, and you're getting close, and then it's going away, and it's not quite happening for you. I think in a lot of ways you can draw parallels to the world we find ourselves in now, where everything's been thrown into chaos, and most people, what they wanted to achieve this year moving forward, it's not going to happen. How did you reconcile that in your own mind and just cope on a day-to-day basis of trying to stick with that goal despite the fact that everything had been, on a yearly basis thrown into chaos?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, everything. I hate the saying that everything happens for a reason, but you have to find the reason for why things are happening. So it just really was an opportunity for me to reflect inside instead of looking outside, like look inside myself. So right here with COVID, like we've had all this time at home. What can you do, with safe at home orders, whatever the measures are, what can you do during this time to make yourself better? And like, I've learned so much, whether I've grown closer with my family or now, like I'm into stock trading, and, I've always been into investing in the stock market, but like I'm on a whole nother level now. And so it's like, what can you do to constantly improve yourself? And with so much free time on your hands, like there should have been some rapid type of improvement mentally, physically, emotionally. I think I was able to touch a lot of those things in my life. And then also it's like, while we're preparing for the future, you can't live in the future. You can prepare for the future, but you need to live in the moment. And that's 2 different things that you're trying to achieve, So I went to a a prison a long, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I went to a prison, and these inmates, there were some in there that were in there for life, and they were not going to get out, and they were studying business or studying, getting, college degrees, or some of them were getting high school degrees. Some were trying to get master's degrees. But I'm like, man, you're in here and you're not leaving here. Why are you trying to improve yourself?
Right.
And that made me think about society. There's a lot of people, some of my friends, and, some of them that aren't my friends, but there's people that aren't preparing to get better, and they have their whole life ahead of them. And the cage that they're living in is their mind. Whereas some of these inmates, the cage that they're living in is their bodies, but not their minds. So it's just a juxtaposition there that was very eye-opening. And now it's like we feel like, we're in these cages, but there's so much you can do. There's so many places you can take your mind to right here and now to come out of this better than we went into it in March.
Have you ever felt that your mind has been caged up, Brendon? Because looking at everything that you've done throughout your early life all the way through to right now, it seems as if you're always exploring other paths. You never limited yourself to one thing. You never were just an athlete, even, doing things like theater in your earlier life. Did you ever find that, or have you always been pretty free of mind?
Yeah, I think I've always been pretty free-minded. I've always marched to the beat of my own drum. Sorry, my dog's crying in the background.
That's cool.
But yeah, I think that's one of the things that my parents have always taught me, and they instilled in me at a very early age, is that you can achieve anything that you put your mind to, but your mind's got to be free, and your mind's got to explore, and your mind has to take yourself to all those places. So, I grew up, pretty poor. In Chicago, in the inner city, and then eventually we moved to California. But the only thing that changed was the environment. We were still poor, just we weren't poor in a dangerous neighborhood anymore. But so I was always able to take my mind to different places and fantasize.
And so I'm really interested, Brendon, how was that experience being in Amsterdam with the Admirals? Because I found that fascinating, just to look and go, wow. I know you're a well-traveled man, but what was that like at that age for you?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I think that it really showed me that, whether it's high school or your freshman year, or maybe at some point in college, that your freshman year of college, or the end of high school, at some point, like, Americans need to get out of America, and we need to go study the world, wherever that is, even if it's South America, which is, our neighbors, or North America, because Canada is very different, even though we're very similar. But in different countries, things are completely different. And so I thought when I was going to get to Amsterdam, I thought it was going to be like all white people and, I'm in the middle of Europe. No, we're in the middle of the world. I'd never seen so many different cultures and languages and religions. And I learned so much, like a huge influence that they have on South America and Indonesia and other places. And those people all live in the Netherlands as well. So it was a great experience. But our first opportunity to meet with the public in Amsterdam, we're in like the Leizenplein, that's like the square downtown or whatever. And a fan came up to me, and he had my brother's jersey, because the Amsterdam Admirals used to be the English team, which I can't remember, the London Monarchs. And so he had one of my brother's London Monarch jerseys. He's like, this is your brother's jersey, and now this franchise has left, London and came to Amsterdam, but I want you to sign it. Now I have both brothers' autograph on one jersey. So it showed me that there's, a long history of fans there. People love football. And that my brother had, already kind of left the Ayanbadejo legacy there with that organization, and that I still have, these big shoes to fill. So it was great to be welcomed and greeted by people that love football.
And we're going to skip ahead, Brendon, because you just had such an amazing life, an amazing career. But I know a moment that's really special for you is the interception you had for Miami against New England, the greatest upset on Monday Night Football. I've heard you talk about it before, and John Madden didn't give you too much props in the analysis of that. Do you want to just tell us what went into that pick and all the work that you had to do that maybe John should have mentioned in there?
Yeah, well, he wouldn't know, he's a commentator, and he's commentating on 100 guys, 50 guys from each team. And there's little tidbits that he needs to know. And plus John's an old guy, right? So of course he's one of the great commentators and coaches in the NFL. But yeah, so, it was my first game starting.
Right.
And for whatever reasons, the Dolphins, they didn't give me too many opportunities to start. I maybe started 3 or 4 games my 2 years in Miami. Not a lot of opportunities on defense. I got a ton of opportunities on special teams and whatnot. And even when I was with the Bears, I didn't get a lot of opportunities to start. I was there for 3 years, but when I got to Baltimore, that's really when I got an opportunity from Vic Fangio, the Denver Broncos head coach. He was the coach that believed in me the most to give me an opportunity to start. And him and I still text to this day. He's like, Brendon, are you ready to come play nickel linebacker for me? I'm like, man, if these knees and if I could, I would. But so just going back to that Miami game on Monday night, I believe that they were maybe 12-2, and we were 2-12 or something. That's very similar to that. But what I was doing was we usually study games in 4-game. We study NFL film in 4-game chunks. So I'm going to look at the most recent stuff that your team has been doing and schemes that you've been doing, and then also I'll look at game tape from when you played us the last time. If there's new coaches, how does this coach scheme versus that coach? So what I did is I found that Tom Brady, instead of taking sacks, he would throw the ball to his outlet, which is his check down or whatever. Yep. And, sometimes it would just be in that vicinity, or sometimes he'd make completions and they'd get first downs. So just in the back of my mind, I knew if he was ever pressured and if I'm in man or zone, I'm going to kind of stray towards the check down. So, I can put myself in position to get an interception. And so lo and behold, Jason Taylor's screaming off the edge. He grabs Tom Brady. Tom Brady throws it to the check down. I'm kind of cheating to that area. He throws it to me. I shouldn't have even really been there. I should have been off, fluffing off maybe 10 yards away from where I was. But just from watching the game tape and studying and being prepared, then I was able to get that interception. We were down at that juncture by a few points. Then we went down and scored a touchdown, and game over. We had an upset. And the great thing is that from this, it probably happened before that, but even now you still see like last minute comebacks, the Dolphins beating the Patriots at least once a year or every other year, when they always finish last in the league and they have no business beating the Patriots. Well, the team's been better under Flores the last couple of years, but they come from behind and they still beat the Patriots to this day, which is a beautiful thing. I'm glad I could be a part of that history.
Yeah, it's the spirit of Brendon Ayanbadejo just living on in these Dolphin teams when they make those comebacks.
Yeah, I mean, I love watching it, and it happens, whether you see like a crazy a pass, and then the guy will pitch it to someone else, and then they'll run it in. I believe it was Drake ran it in for a touchdown, or just these crazy comebacks. Like, yeah, I get excited every time I see but I'm cheering for the Patriots this year, though, for whatever reasons. I think a lot of it is because of Cam Newton's there, and I want to see them win with Cam. But then I'm also cheering for Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, because I want to see that Tom is successful, because I've always been a Tom Brady fan, but I've never been a Patriots fan. Right. So it's kind of cool. It's weird for me to cheer for the Patriots and then Tom Brady in Tampa and cheering him on. So it's kind of cool. It's been a fun, interesting year for me.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting, because it was something I was going to ask you. I mean, obviously, your dislike of the Patriots, you've talked about that before, but I always thought you'd be a Cam guy. I thought, you'd like a bit of Cam. But I think they're doing really well this year with everything that's going on with all the opt-outs. And, I mean, I'm pretty surprised at how well they're doing. How have you seen it?
Yeah, and he had to miss a game, I think, because of COVID, or games had to be rescheduled. But it was funny, this offseason, Cam was training at UCLA most of this entire offseason. He didn't have a team, though. And OBJ was training as well. They trained together. So Cam was throwing to him all summer at UCLA, and my son was playing soccer at UCLA. So we were with them all summer, and they would take pictures with the kids, and they were super nice with the kids. So that's like, I like them even more. I didn't get to play against either one of them. I'm like 1 year removed. But so to see who they are on the field and off the field, and then to see that hold true, when the kids wanted to take a picture or get autographs, they were totally nice, and they did all that stuff with the kids. So it just cemented that I needed to cheer for both of those guys. And unfortunately, OBJ had that season-ending knee injury. But Cam, he's had his ups and downs this year. But last game, they had an amazing game, and he played really well. So it's good to see.
And you both got a similar sort of swag, I think, as well. You both like to wear some flashy outfits and like to show that off, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I love some fashion. I think he takes it to the next level. He's got a huge, amazing, like the guy is huge now, right? So he's got this huge, amazing frame, so he looks good. And he puts, he has a tailor that puts his and a stylist that puts his suits together for every game. But yeah, he's got the money to do that. I don't think I ever went that far, but I was into it though.
Yeah, no, I love that. Brendon, let's go to the Super Bowl Ravens team. I know you've mentioned before that they weren't the most talented team, but you've said they were the most close-knit and you're most like a family. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more in terms of maybe some specifics that made you guys so tight knit?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to the story I gave you with Jason Taylor putting pressure on Tom Brady and then Tom Brady throwing the ball away, and I was there. So when the thing with that Ravens team is that when we're so close, and that was also the year that that marriage equality came up for the ballot in the United States, but particularly Maryland and a couple other states. But we're so close because we talked about so many different topics in the locker room, and kind of a cliche saying is never talk about religion and politics, at the dinner table. And with as much time as you are with NFL guys and your teammates in the locker room, we discussed every single topic. There was no holds barred in terms of topics that we would talk about. So that's what made that team so much closer than other teams that I played on. And so when we were in, because of those conversations, when we were in, precarious situations or positions, guys knew that they could trust and lean on the guy that was next to them. Like, I know that you're going to do your job, or I can stray from my job. Can you get my back? If I'm going to try to make a play and do something that's off of my assignment, can you make sure you cover for me? So that's why that team was so close and we were able to do what we did. I bet you a lot of my guys in Baltimore are going to say, no, that's the most talented team ever. But, for me, the most talented team I played on was the Chicago Bears team in 2007. We played in the Super Bowl and we lost to Peyton Manning. In fact, I lost to Peyton Manning in college, lost to him all throughout my entire 10 years in the NFL. The only time I beat Peyton Manning was in the AFC divisional game that took us to play the Patriots in the AFC championship game. And then we played in the Super Bowl against the 49ers. But that was the only time in my career that I was ever able to beat Peyton Manning. And it came at the right time as well. But yeah, that's why that team was so close, because we could talk about anything. And we had a great coaching staff, and just, it was a little bit different. I think a lot of teams and a lot of businesses are more ran today like that Ravens team that was ran in that 2012 team. And I think that it shows up that when people can show up to work and be their authentic selves and be who they are and not be ridiculed or not be in fear of their job or their position, that it really opens them up on a lot of, emotionally and then talent-wise, creative thinking-wise. And then you're going to have an extra affection and affinity for your team, for your job, that you're going to go the extra mile. So I see that, a lot of businesses today are ran more like that instead of kind of making you fit in a box. They're going to allow you to be who you are when you show up to work.
So you mentioned some of the more successful teams and how the locker rooms had that sort of style, Brendon. But when you compare that to, let's say, it doesn't need to be specific, but some of those teams that you played on, the seasons where the record was around that under 5 win total, were the locker rooms drastically different, talent-wise aside?
Talent-wise aside, yeah, because I think in my 10 years, we made the playoffs 7 out of 10 teams, and 8 out of 10 teams, I believe, had double-digit wins, which is huge. So 10 wins or more in a season, 8 out of the 10 teams. So basically, you only played on 2 teams that were probably sub 500. One of those was kind of like the Super Bowl hangover year after we lost. So that 2007 season, it was basically the same amount of talent on the team, but why wasn't the team as good as we were the previous year? Who knows? But I would say that organizationally, the organization, Chicago Bears isn't known for being, a top-notch organization. Right. And then the Miami Dolphins as well. I think they're a lot better under Flores and what's going on now, but they've never really been known for organizationally being ran as one of the best businesses or as one of the best franchises in the league. If I think like, okay, organizationally, who runs really well teams operationally, and you take out talent, you think of New England. I think of the Rams today. Of course, I always think about the Ravens. In some of those key factors, they lead to success just by running the business right. It leads to being successful on the field, and that's all org chart. That's team president, head coach, general manager.
Mm-hmm. And Brendon, I just want to do a little bit of a word association, and then if you have a little anecdote about that particular person, feel free to just run with it. It's less so about their on field, but more just as a holistic thing. So Ray Lewis.
Man, passionate. And obviously that's the obvious word that comes to mind, but maybe people think inspirational. But he has a lot of things that he loves and he believes in that you wouldn't know. And so we would be flying to any game or before a game, and I'd sit next to Ray as we would fly. And even for home games, we drive to home games together. And he would talk to Steve McNair's mom before every single game. And, tragedy happened with Steve McNair. He was murdered, and we lost him way too soon. And so he would talk to Steve McNair's mom before every game. And then he knows all the statistics about domestic violence against women, not just in the United States, but also world. And so you'd be sitting there. He's like, that every 8 seconds a woman's being beat up by, her significant other in the United States. And it's you just wouldn't think that those were the conversations that we would be having, taking off before a flight or leading up to a game, So just a super passionate person and compassionate as well, and a loving dad. He's got a bunch of kids. His kids would always be around, or he's at his kids' games and whatnot. So he was inspirational for me, as a father leading up. And when I met him, I only had one kid. I got 3 kids now. So I take some of my Ray Lewis-isms and apply them to the kids.
That's brilliant. And I hear you do a really good impersonation of him. Can you give us any of that right now?
I can't do any impersonations right now, just because I haven't been around Ray in so long. But
right.
If I talk to him one time on the phone, all of a sudden it would all come back to me.
All right. Well, we'll save that for a rainy day, I think.
Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Ed Reed.
Man, Ed Reed. He is a perfectionist. And you wouldn't think about it, but some of the littlest things upset him the most. And so in our locker room, like if the locker room wasn't clean, he'd be upset. And of course, we have people in there that are cleaning the locker room. But for him, it's like, no, it's like if you drop the towel or you left the soap bar, it's up to you, to treat this locker room like you treat your house. So one day he called a team meeting and he kicked all the coaches out of the team meeting. And it was all about hygiene and keeping the locker room clean. And he's like, if you can't keep the locker room clean, how are you going to win a football game? So it was pretty funny, but he was dead serious about it. So now when I see him going on his rants on Instagram, he's got like, he mows his own lawn, or he's spying on deer that are in the field, or he's, talking about his cigars or whatever. I totally get it and understand it.
That's brilliant. He'd be good now during this whole COVID time. Imagine having him keeping the hygiene.
Yeah, well, he puts every time not every time, but when he's taking his COVID test, he puts it on. He's like, I'm taking a COVID test. And he does the whole, the whole scenario. But that's good because it leads other people to going and getting tested, and not being afraid of getting that test. So.
And that's important. Terrell Suggs.
Man, Sizzle. No filter, man. No filter. That dude, he'll blurt anything out. He'll blurt anything out. He'll say anything, but he's a movie savant. So he knows lines from every movie, and he's gone to Cannes, and he goes to music festivals. There's one in Utah that's a big one here, but he's big into the movie business, and I think that's what he wants to do when he's done playing. He wants to be a producer or a writer, and so he's just unfiltered. But if you want to be a writer or a producer, right, I guess you kind of got to have that. He's got it for sure. Yeah.
And final one on this word association, Joe Flacco.
Flacco. Man, what can I say about Joe? He's pretty quiet. He's a pretty quiet guy. I think obviously he came into the league, he was a rookie, and I was his they would assign a veteran player to kind of be the mentor of rookies, and I was kind of his mentor. Like obviously I'm not going to show him how to play quarterback, but like we had to meet once a week for 30 minutes, I had him and this other guy named Haruki Nakamura. They both came in together, and I was their kind of their senior player that they would, they'd be like my little buddies.
Yeah.
But but by the time I left the league, he was in his 5th year, he was married, kids, and now he's got even more kids, and he's in his he's in his double-digit years. I think he's in year 12 now or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's just great to see him going from a quiet rookie that wasn't even supposed to start until somebody got injured. Actually, the 2 quarterbacks ahead of him, he was 3rd string, even as I believe he was a 1st-round draft pick, maybe. But for whatever happened, the players in front of him both got hurt. He ended up starting. And we had a great season that year. We had a really good year. I think we went all the way to the maybe we went to the AFC Championship game or the divisional game. I think we did go to the AFC Championship game, but he was super quiet, and then now just he just blossomed into a great leader and a really good, strong quarterback. Especially the year we won the Super Bowl, you could attribute a lot of the win to his chemistry with the tight ends and with the receivers and just running that offense. I mean, he was unstoppable come playoff time.
Can I go one more and go Coach Harbaugh? Because I'm really interested.
Harbs.
Yeah, here
Harbs. We go. One word for Harbs. I would say innovative.
Right.
And the reason why is because he wants to look at studies. He wants to look at things he can do within the rules of the game to give you an advantage. So one thing we did is when we flew to Denver to play in that AFC divisional game, he wanted us there less than 24 hours. He wanted to get us there as late as possible, play the game, and then get us out, because studies had shown that the more time you spent at high altitude in Denver, Mile High Stadium and all that, that your oxygen levels go down. So if you go there early, then you're giving yourself a disadvantage. If you go there late, then your oxygen levels aren't going to change within that 24-hour window. And so he would do all kinds of cool stuff like that. And he'd find, he implemented the whole buddy system, where you have kind of a mentor, older veteran player to mentor the younger players. But the Ravens called me recently to do a study, and it was a self-analysis on what it means to be a Raven. And they only asked like 50 Ravens in all their history of the organization. I would say the organization is probably 25 years old now. I'm just guessing. But they only picked 50 players, and I was honored to be one of them. And what it means to be a Raven, I'm sure that self-analysis, that study, he was probably the brainchild of that. So he's always innovating and always thinking of the best ways to get the most out of the players, and also have the organization innovate so they can create great men as well as great football players.
Can you shed any light on what it did mean to be a Raven and what that study revealed to you?
Yeah, well, I think, you got to start at the top, and the owner of the Ravens now is Steve Bisciotti, and he always was when I was with the team. But if you look at him as a businessman, he started temp agencies, so temporary job agencies where you can call a temp agency, and then they have access to this database, and the database has all the employers that are looking for people to employ on a temp basis. So he created that. He invented that. He's also has an aerospace engineering company. So at the time when I was a Raven, it was the only team that was owned, meaning that they didn't take a loan out to buy the team. He bought the team with cash. So he bought it outright. Maybe there's 2 teams now that are outright bought and owned, but it's not a common practice in the NFL to own the team. So as a businessman, to be a Raven is, to handle your business, on the field, off the field, in life with your family, and in business, and in the way that you carry yourself proud as a Raven. But also it means tough, because the city of Baltimore is a tough city, and Steve Bisciotti's from Baltimore. So, the Raven teams are usually known because of the defense, right? So like a tough defensive team, even though I know Lamar right now, we're known for our offense, and even, with Joe Flacco at certain times, great offenses with Ray Rice and Joe and Anquan Bolden and so on and so forth. But so yeah, I mean, you got to be tough, you got to be strong, and then teams that have football players, like even if you look at Justin Tucker, our kicker, he's an athlete. Like he can go down, he can make some tackles. Not that you want him to, but the team was full of football players, like guys on that roster, they can play football. So for me, I could play linebacker. You could put me back and put me in the secondary. I could rush off the edge, and then I could play special teams. Shoot, I'd go play running back if I could have. But they have guys that are football players, not just these specialists that play, and like even like a guy like Anquan Bolden and making that signing. I know it was a long time ago, but he was a great blocker, and he's a great receiver as well. So I think that's what the Ravens are about. It's about whatever it is that you do, be great at what you do and represent yourself on and off the field in a great way. And you got to be tough. And that pretty much encapsulates the city of Baltimore.
Brendon, you have a real courage of conviction, I find, and you are rather outspoken in a lot of areas that are really of great passion and love for yourself. Where's that come from?
Yeah, I think I'm a child of the 70s. I'm a bit older than you, Patty. You're probably in the 2000 era or
96.
late 90s, right?
You're still looking jacked though.
I try. I still got to get my workout in, and I still got to do what I got to do. I have beautiful daughters too, so I got to make sure I keep them in check. But yeah, I think that I was kind of born coming out of the civil rights era, and everything that we heard as kids, it glorified Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and kind of some of these civil rights leaders. So that was big growing up. And then being that my mom is white and my dad is Nigerian, our household, and then my mom later married a Mexican. So we had a lot of different ethnicities in our house. So we're always taught to love and respect all different ethnicities. And I was also taught about my culture as well, and to have an enormous amount of respect for the cultures and my ancestors. And I think that my parents planted a seed, and they watered that seed, and then this is what came out. But if I look at my siblings, we're not just the same DNA physically, but mentally we all think the same way, but it's from being in that same household. So, things that I wouldn't, maybe debate with other people, those aren't debated issues in my house. I mean, we debate about all kinds of stuff in my house, sure, and talk about all kinds of different things, but we're all kind of in the same alignment, which isn't odd, but to be expected, because that's kind of what our parents instilled in us. So I think it just stems from that, and then that was kind of the roots of the tree, and then there's a lot of different stems that come along the way with that my parents believed in. So whether it's education, self-confidence, self-love, equality and equal rights for everybody, regardless of religion, gender, orientation, and whatever country that you're from, everybody is equal. So I think that was a great beacon and a great navigator for me to be able to navigate through life, and especially in these times when we're seeing a lot of these things reoccurring, because it seemed like athletes and people in general were kind of lost for a long time, because we talk about like maybe Michael Jordan and what kind of fights did he have from an equal rights standpoint, or some other athletes. And it seemed like it was pretty smooth sailing in the 90s and in the early 2000s. But a lot of the things we're fighting for today, they always happened. We just didn't have, camera phones and all those things. So we kind of took the blanket off of everything and just kind of unmasked it. And now we see it. But these aren't like new things that are occurring. These things were always happening. So now, starting with Colin Kaepernick in 2016, we had another fight to fight. And you see how many people supported what he was saying in 2016 versus how much people are supporting what he's saying in 2020.
Right.
In 2016, there wasn't a lot of people on his side, even though he was on the right side of history. And now, there's huge corporations, even the NFL, every sporting team, other countries. Like it's crazy how, I guess just people didn't accept it back then, but these things have always happened. You could go back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, so on and so forth. But yeah, we unveiled those things, and so we're here now.
So you bring up Colin Kaepernick there, Brendon, and there's obviously some similarities between the two of you in the sense that you both really stood up for what you felt was right and just, and ultimately what is right and just. How do you deal with this concept of being a distraction? Because I know that was referenced in terms of your involvement in same-sex and equality marriage debate. How do you feel that concept is now received in the NFL? Because I suppose athletes are now becoming, they're not as apolitical as they once were now, right? But also then there is that line of, well, Colin Kaepernick's too much of a distraction. Why are we going to bring him in?
Yeah, well, I think, you're obligated to talk to media no matter what, so the topics of the media, does that make you a better football player just because you're talking about what you studied? Or, so I don't see how it's a distraction, because you're addressing questions that aren't football related. But half the time we're not giving up any football information that's intel anyways. We're just talking, so-and-so number 58 on the roster and blah, blah, blah is the quarterback, Tom Brady. He's great. Like, that's not, there's no intelligence that's being given up there, and we're not revealing that information anyway. So I just never understood, like, why does it matter what it is that we're talking about, and how that's a distraction. And plus, when you're on the field, you're not talking about any of that off the field stuff. Yes, in the locker room, you do talk about off field stuff, which is normal. And you only have X amount of time for meeting time anyways. Your whole day's slated and scheduled, and we're only going to dedicate, every day we start out with an hour of meetings, regardless of what the topics are. We love to do, as much football as we can, but there's always housekeeping stuff that we start off with anyways. Right. So yeah, I think, is it a distraction? I don't necessarily think so, but there are distracting things, that do occur and that do happen. But I didn't necessarily think it was a distraction. But
do you think we're moving away from that thought process though of, Brendon talks about issues that are outside of football, he's a distraction. Do you think we're getting away from those labels as we become more progressive and evolve?
I think that, there's a natural process that happens, and where are we in that process of reaching whatever milestone it is that we're trying to achieve? So as you get closer to that milestone, then you're going to talk about those things more, right? And then eventually, if you achieve the milestone, then there's not a need to talk about it. So I think, history and time is going to kind of dictate how much we talk about those things. And then whether, that's a distraction, or if it matters that a player is talking about these things or not. Now, you notice, like, on the football fields, you see Black Lives Matters. On the basketball courts, you see it. They're asking questions related to what are you doing, in terms of Black equity, or for women, and, putting them in positions of leadership and whatnot. So I think we're talking about it now because we're in a transformational period in time. And so they're not going to say anything like, oh, I don't want that player. They're too progressive or too proactive. Well, that's what everybody's doing right now. So we're kind of just following the trends of what's going on with different milestones that we're trying to achieve, until the next topic comes up. But I think ideally, in a perfect world, we reach this utopian society, and then we try to stay, at that high level. But we have to talk about it. We have to address it, and everybody's got to be, willing to spend some time and dedicate some time towards it, or else, things aren't going to change.
Mm-hmm. And let's just finish off with a bit of a fun one to finish off, B. I know that you've mentioned before that some weird things have happened in the NFL, and certainly being from Australia, anything that is normal may even seem a bit foreign here. I know you mentioned once that you'd heard of a player hooking up with his teammate's mom, and then there's things like the Minnesota boat party. Like, is there anything that's a bit outlandish or a bit strange that you go, okay, like that's just some other world?
I think because I'm in such a different place, like, the party stuff doesn't surprise me anymore. Like, so many different parties and things happen like that. For example, Bryant McKinney and the Minnesota boat party or whatever. I'm good friends with Bryant. But I think the things that kind of impress me more so now is that, like, if an athlete is doing something where they're part of a huge company, or, they're making more money off the field than they are on the field, something to that sort. So it's always cool, like, for me, like, for an active player. And for example, Drew Brees has all these franchises. I believe it's food, but he's a part of a company that owns a bunch of food fitness franchises. Or Nnamdi Asamoah, the cornerback from the Raiders and Eagles, and some other teams that you're familiar with, whether he has these huge film projects that are going on and he's doing amazing in that industry, or guys own tech companies. So those are kind of the things that I'm like, wow, like, that's amazing to me now. Whereas, like, oh, how much can you party? Like, that's not as interesting to me, or what guys are doing with girls. But yeah, I think those are kind of the astronomical things that kind of blow my mind now. And players that do it while they're playing, which is even more rare and more special. So some amazing businessmen while they played, or Kobe and LeBron and Nnamdi. And I even have some teammates now that when we played, we're trying to get some business stuff together, and they just came to fruition now. They didn't happen, while we played, and now these businesses are robust and they're doing well. But, while we played, we weren't able to put our brains towards being, the best football players in the world and the best businessmen. But as they transitioned out, then they had all that available capacity to dedicate it towards business. So those are the things, you're 25-ish, you want 26, you want to hear about all the parties. I'm 45-ish. and I want to hear about the business moguls now.
Hey, we can maybe meet in between. I reckon that'll be a good sweet spot.
I think so. Then we'd be like Elon Musk, a little bit of party and a little bit of work.
Hey, there you go. Elon 2.0, I reckon. We can sort that out. Hey, Brendon, just finally, my man, Orange Theory, that's obviously pumping over there. Well, not right now in the States, is it? But obviously you've done some great things over there. How are you guys shaping up for 2021? Yeah, 2021.
Yeah, I think 2020 was kind of a wash, and we're just preparing for 2021, and we want to spend 2021, depending on what's going on with the vaccine and curbing the virus, getting ourselves prepared to be back on a huge trajectory for 2022. So we got a lot of work to do in 2021. We went from a $1.2 billion business, just talking about all the Orange Theories, and then now a lot of things are shut down. All my units, for the most part, in California and even in Melbourne, have been shut down to a certain extent, and the California ones didn't reopen. So we're going to spend some time between now, and I have a feeling we're going to be down for a while in California. I don't know, maybe it's March, which I don't think too many people are hearing that, but that's what we're preparing for. And just really opening up and trying to pick up where we left off, and then start getting some traction up again throughout, April, May, June. And man, it's been knocked us on our pants for just about a year now. So we're just, like I said, if you're sitting here during this pandemic and you're not making yourself better in some way, shape, or form, then it's a lost opportunity, and you can't ever make up for missed time. So we're trying to just come out of this thing swinging.
I know you definitely will, my man. I appreciate you joining me, Brendon, on the Worldwide Quarterback. It's been my pleasure, and I'm really glad we've been able to shoot the breeze on a few things.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and continued luck and success with the potty.